My name is Jen Brady, and I'm an author. I have in the past published several books that are more middle grade in nature, and a couple of years ago, I decided to branch out into young adult sweet romance, and the first project I took on under this new genre to me was a retelling of Little Women. So I have 4 books, and there's one for each of the sisters. You can read them independently. You don't have to read one before the other, but if you read them in order, there are threads that kind of weave along the whole series. So it's best to read them in order, but you don't have to. And I just had a lot of fun adapting Little Women for 2021.
One of my friends on Instagram, she had read some of your books, and I told you that you are coming back, and then she sent a question.
Oh.
Yeah, she's
cool.
asking, what did you especially focus on when writing the Meg and John relationship in this century?
Well, I guess it was the social aspect, because so much was made of the wealth versus the poor in making the matches in the original, and how so many women were wanting to or having to marry for money, and how Meg kind of chose not to. She married for love, and in this day and age, yeah, that still can be something that happens, but women have a lot more opportunities now. They don't have to be told that they need to consider that kind of thing. So, well, the money issue was kind of in the book. It was more the social aspect of the popularity and can this person get you where you want to be in life, and that kind of thing, rather than the money. So I guess I focused mainly on the social aspect and what the friends think, and what your social circles are going to say if you date someone who is maybe out of your social circle, that kind of thing, because I see that a lot in teenagers and social media and high school life, and I think that is kind of a tough issue, maybe more so than some of the things that were involved in the original book.
I think the social aspect was also important in the 19th century, but they definitely put way more weight on how wealthy the person was.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like you said, there wasn't that many opportunities for women to have a job at all. So it's kind of makes sense that you had to marry someone who could provide to you and your family.
Yeah, definitely.
When I was reading your book, I did feel that it translated very well to this century, because you brought the story to high school world, where reputation is very important, and there are all these different social classes in high school in the same way that there is in Little Women. I thought it translated very well to this particular story.
Well, thanks. I kind of thought that it was the easiest one to adapt. Some of the other ones, I kind of really had to think hard about, what would that look like in our time. That one, it pretty much kind of fell into place. There were a lot of really easy parallels.
Yeah, like Meg going to Vanity Fair.
Yeah.
That's pretty easy to put into the context of trying to be popular in high school. I would like to ask you, when did you begin writing?
I have old notebooks that you can barely read because my printing is so bad, because I'm in like 2nd grade, that are basically fan fictions of various Saturday morning cartoons that my friends and I used to like to watch. So,
I love that.
Yeah, I've been interested in writing and creating stories, and even what I did here, adapting or kind of expanding the world of characters and stories that I already enjoyed. So I liked doing the fan fiction when I was younger, and as I got older, I started creating my own stories, and I just kind of never stopped writing.
What other fandoms you like beside Little Women?
Big one for me growing up was Star Trek. My mom loved Star Trek, the original series. So when I was old enough, I never really got into that one, but I loved The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And I still, every now and then, I'll go back and be like, okay, I'm going to watch a season of Star Trek. So I was real big into science fiction and fantasy. Star Wars is another one. I don't know why people think you have to have a favorite or choose between them because they're both awesome. My husband and I have just been recently into The Mandalorian and the Boba Fett, and now we're waiting for our son to have some time so that we could all watch the new Obi-Wan Kenobi one. So I was into a lot of science fiction and fantasy fandoms.
My sister's a massive Star Trek fan.
Well, there's so much Star Trek.
Yeah.
So you can go down that rabbit hole for days.
She only agreed to watch the 1978 Little Woman because it had William Shatner.
Oh, that's funny.
But she did like it.
Oh, I thought of one other fandom that I was huge into. I still like, but as a teenager, oh my gosh, North and South, the miniseries.
Oh yeah.
And I kind of watched that for the same reason as your sister, because Jonathan Frakes, who was on The Next Generation, he was one of my favorite actors on that. He was in North and South. And so I started watching North and South. And then I think it was like 30 minutes into it, I was in love with that fandom. And my friends and I also wrote fan fiction about North and South. So.
I think we talked about this a little bit the last time, that perhaps John is not that popular as Laurie and Frederick because he's more introverted than he's extroverted.
Yeah, I would agree. He's not one that really stands out on your first read or your first viewing of the movie as much as maybe the other men. But I've always really liked John. He just kind of seems like a strong, maybe that strong and silent kind of type. Yeah, he's not as much focused on in things either. Well, he really wasn't as, well, that's not true. I was going to say he wasn't in Little Women, the original book, as much, but when you read the second half, The Good Wives, there is quite a bit of John, and then he's in some of the sequels too, so he's there. He just, yeah, he isn't as, I guess, exciting, but I don't know, I thought he had some really good qualities too, so I've always kind of been a fan of him.
When I read Little Woman as a child, I didn't really pay that much attention to him, but then when I read Little Woman more as a mature person, in Camp Lawrence chapter, there's this moment where he tells this story, or they are like telling the story together. You know that play where you make up something, and the other continues. Yeah,
and they each told their own little paragraph, and
it's a story about a knife that goes to save a princess, and John's princess is Meg March.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
And I thought, when I read it for the first time, when I realized what I was reading as a teen, I was like, that's kind of racy.
Yeah, from back then it kind of probably was.
Because Meg was 17 and he was maybe 27, 28. There was some kind of an age gap there as well.
Yeah.
It was pretty normal back then, so I don't think it's appropriate for the time period.
Yeah.
Hello friends, it is Niina from the Little Woman podcast. Just to let you all know that the Little Woman podcast episode transcripts are now available as books. You can find them as paperbacks and ebooks. They are wonderful reading for all the fans of Louisa May Alcott. You can find all the links from the description. And now, back to the show.
And they didn't even bat an eye at it, it didn't seem, because they would talk about Joe and Frederick having a big age gap, but no one ever said anything about Meg and John, even though, you know, they had 10 years or 8 years or whatever. But yeah, that was pretty common.
Louisa May Alcott, she had a thing for older guys.
Older guys, yeah. And I think as a kid, when I was reading Little Women, and maybe this is where he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, you're more focused on the kid characters, the teenage characters, and he's always an adult, so maybe that's why he doesn't make as much of an impression, especially on our first read throughs, because a lot of times we're kids or teenagers when we first first read the story.
I think in the chapter Camp Lawrence, there's also the moment when he is rowing the boat with Meg, and then Laurie is his cousins, the rich cousins.
Mm-hmm.
No, not cousins, friends.
Friends, yeah.
From England. The girl is like, what are you doing for a living? And Meg is like, I am a governess. And then she's like,
oh, you have to work.
Yeah. Why do you have to work? And
right.
Then John is like, I think being a governess is a really cool thing. And I just later on realized that, well, they're both teachers.
Yeah, they are. I liked how he kind of swoops in and tells, is it Kate? I think her name is Kate. The
Kate
snobby sister. Yeah, the
Kate
snobby sister
yeah.
of Fred. You know, maybe it's different in England, but here it's looked up to if you can go support yourself, and working isn't a bad thing. He really valued that Meg was helping her family and a hard worker, and kind of went in and was talking about that to get Kate off her back almost.
That was one of those moments that really made me fall in love with John's character later on. But yeah, I think he's more of an introvert, and with Beth maybe, and then the others to be more extroverted.
Yeah, I think so. And that's probably why he isn't as focused on, but he's still a great character.
Did you use your own high school, college memories when writing this book?
Maybe a little, but I was not like Meg at all. I was more of a shy Beth. I was never in with the in crowd or doing things like going to prom, and I guess I was more like the John character, not really feeling like I fit in high school, and I was quiet and liked to read. And so maybe you're right, and I did draw on my high school experiences. I'm just now realizing, but it wasn't for Meg, it was for the John character.
You know the movie Mean Girls?
Yes.
When they go through all the cliques in the high school scenario, and then they go to the art students, that's where I was.
Okay. It's a good place to be too.
Yeah, that's why I didn't like school that much. But when I went to art school, there was no cliques because we all came from that.
All art students. Yeah. Yeah, high school wasn't my favorite time at all. It wasn't like a horrid experience or anything. I wasn't like horribly bullied or anything like that, but I just didn't really feel like I fit in there. I found my friends, my true friends in college, and also at summer camp. I was real big into summer camp, and that's actually what I wrote about for my first series for 10, 15 years. That's kind of what I worked on, books about summer camp, because that was more my things that had made an impression on me and the place where I'd had really good times.
I never went to summer camp.
Oh, you should have. It was so fun.
Well, I had fun time in art school. That's okay.
Yeah. I bet it's probably very similar in the whole finding people that you have things in common with. Like you said, there aren't cliques anymore because everybody loves art and has the same kind of viewpoint. That's kind of what camp was.
That's true. I was thinking, what does Little Woman, the original novel, tells about John's background? Because I don't think it tells that much.
All I remember is he took care of his mom or something. It kind of alluded that she might have been elderly and ill or something. I kind of went with the having to take care of the mom, but in a different way with addiction and stuff like that, rather than, because they really don't say much. You don't know. It's kind of a mystery, but that's basically what they say. And that he might have had a brother maybe in the original.
I've written to my notes he had ill mother who he sent money to, and maybe a brother.
Yeah, I don't think they really got into the backstory very much.
It's the same with Fredrik's character, only that he had a sister who sadly died, and two nephews.
And the nephews. And
John went to war, and in your version, he's planning to go to the Marines. Was that right?
National Guard.
National Guard.
Which is because I wanted him to be able to be accessible for other books. If I would have sent him off to the Marines or the Army or something, he'd be gone. So I did National Guard because they have their regular boot camp and stuff, but then they live basically civilian lives, but they have training I think it's once a month they'll have a training. And
Okay.
but
So in your version, John's mom had addiction with alcohol. He came from a very poor background, and he tried to fake to his friends and everyone else that he came from a normal home. And then we have Meg also trying to fake to her friends that she enjoys being the popular it girl.
yeah, because in the Meg Goes to Vanity Fair, a lot of times what they focus on is, oh, Meg dresses up, and Meg, they almost make it out that, oh, she's having fun and this is great and this is what she really wants. And she did want to, run with that crowd, but she also realized things she didn't like about it when she's being talked about. And when she's just realizing, I thought I wanted to run with this crowd, but maybe there's some negatives too. So I tried to kind of focus on that in my book, the discovering who you are, and maybe that's not what you thought you wanted in life when you mature and grow up a little bit.
I think that's a huge theme in Little Woman in the original book as well, that the things that you want as a teenager are not necessarily those things that you want as an adult.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that in a few of the different storylines.
Yeah.
In Louisa May Alcott's.
Jo says that her castle in the air is to write books and own horses and be filthy rich. But then in the second book, there's the chapter All Alone.
She realizes she wants companionship and
she wants
someone to have a life with.
Exactly.
She still does want to be a writer, and she does write, but I think she's happier with the life that she ends up making for herself than the life that she maybe imagined as a 15-year-old.
And I think what Meg wanted, she wanted to be popular and have nice things.
And rich, and she wanted to be like her friends and throwing the balls and buying the expensive fabric and keeping it, and the pretty dresses and the servants and all that.
And then in the second part, she no longer wants those things.
No, she just wants to be wife and mom and her own little family, and it seems like she's pretty happy doing that.
It is a big part of Little Woman storylines. Then you had Laurie making pranks.
That was one of my favorite parts in the original, and they don't often adapt that, but they did in my introduction to Little Women, which was the cartoon from Japan in the 80s. I distinctly remember the episode where Laurie is doing the back and forth letters. And one of the reasons I remember it is because they changed the name on the paper. They called him Carl or something. When the people were speaking, they said John. And then when they show the letter in the cartoon, it says like Carl or Kevin or something at the bottom. And my friend and I would always rewind it, and the character says, as she's reading it, your servant John Brooks or something, but it clearly says a different name. And my friend and I always thought that was hilarious, so we'd rewind that part in the tapes that my grandma would tape for us. So I distinctly remember this prank part, and it's never in the movies, and I'm always disappointed. So I wanted to make sure that I adapted the prank of the fake letters to and from Meg and John. Only now it's 2021, so it was texting, of course.
Mm-hmm. When I read your book, I thought this is the language is something that I could imagine him to use. He wrote in a way that Meg could recognize that wasn't written by John.
Yeah.
But it's worse in the original because Meg actually thinks that the letters came from John, and she even replies to them.
Yeah.
So it's really a vicious thing that he does in the original, but nobody speaks about it. Well, I do, but nobody else
Yeah.
really seems to do that.
There's a few parts that really stuck out to me, either from the cartoon or the original book when I was younger, that like have stayed with me. And now when I read it, I get to that part, I'm like, oh, that's one of my favorite parts. And they don't often pick it to do the adaptations. Like, one of my other favorite parts is the Amy and the art fair. So I made sure to put the art fair in my fourth book, which is the Amy book. But they never have the whole art fair debacle with the rival artist who gets her table. And it really shows how she's grown as a character, because she handles that disappointment pretty classy.
Yeah.
Whereas Amy from the first book, Little Women rather than Good Wives, or is that in I can't remember. The younger Amy definitely would have not handled that well. She would have kicked up a fit and freaked out, and older Amy was very gracious, and I always liked that part, and they never put that in any of the adaptations. The pranks and the art fair are the two big ones I can think of that I wanted to make sure got in there. So
that is the benefit of creating your own version, that you can add the things that you want to have there.
True.
Another thing that they never add is the symposium with Joe and Frederick, which is one of my favorites in the novel.
Is that in the Winona Ryder one?
There's something similar when they meet and they have the discussion about philosophy.
Yeah. And he kind of cuts in and says he thinks women should be able to tell their opinions. Yeah, but it's just like a 30-second scene probably. Yeah, you're right. They never do put that in. Oh, yeah, in the 1994 film, they kind of show that, but yeah, you're right. They never show it in full. And I think that's the only one I can remember having it in.
Yeah.
The symposium part.
In the 2017, he invites her to the symposium, but then they don't include the symposium, and it makes me so angry.
Is that the miniseries?
Yeah, the miniseries.
Like PBS was like, it was two or three episodes or something. Yeah. I liked that one. I've only seen it once though. So I don't remember that one as well as some of the others.
Oh, the Hollywood people bring the symposium to the Little Woman adaptations. Yeah. Please. And thinking about the art fair, I think they should also include that or something like that, because if I remember right, there are these moments there where Amy and Laurie are a bit flirtatious in the book. Mm-hmm. Why that is not in the movie?
I don't know. Well, I mean, I've always said they need to do a good old-fashioned, like we were talking about North and South, 80s miniseries where it goes on for like 6 or 7 days for 2 hours a day. They need to do something like that with Little Women, because it's such a massive book, and 90 minutes or 2 hours just isn't enough time. I mean, I had trouble putting everything in to 4 different books that I wanted to fit in. Some things had to just fall by the wayside. And that was 4 different books. So I'm sure that the time restraints make it so that they can't. But man, wouldn't it be great to have an actual long miniseries that you can fit all these fun little lesser known scenes into?
I would love that. And I have the whole idea that they should include like Laurie's point of view and then Frederick's point of view and his life in Berlin. Oh, I'd love that.
That would be fun. That was something that was fun about writing the book. I ended up doing 8 viewpoints in the end, 2 per book. So it was kind of funny to write from the John point of view or the Laurie point of view or the Friedrich, because I think we mainly get Joe's and then a little bit of Meg and Amy in the original.
Yeah.
But not, it's all kind of under the lens of Louisa May Alcott, which is great. She's a great writer, but it kind of all, I don't know, it was like all under one viewpoint. And I always kind of wondered, what these other characters thought. What does Beth think about being the peacemaker of the family? Is it exhausting? Or is it, oh, someone's coming into my room. Sorry.
It's all right.
My husband and my cat just walked in, so just wait a minute.
Waving back. I was thinking about the 1949 film. There's this moment where Laurie is like, why do you need to work, Joe? Do you need money? I have lots of money. Like, he doesn't really understand why the girls have to work. And
Right.
I think I saw some of that in your book as well, because Laurie is unproductive and he's lazy because everything has been handed over to him.
He doesn't have to work, and he doesn't have to really try for anything. And I think when you grow up like that, you don't really understand. You can't really comprehend that there is another way of life for other people.
I liked your book because it showed clearly that how John is blown away when he enters the Lawrence home, and then he lives in the trailer park. He's really poor. But I think in the original book, it does mention how the girls are really poor and how John is very poor. But sometimes I feel like the modern readers don't really pay that much attention to the differences.
It's hard for us to realize, because as modern readers, we see, oh, they have a maid, or oh, so they don't have a carriage. Well, you know, big deal. I bet a lot of people didn't have carriages, but it's hard for us to get what the constructs of the social class were back then, because to us it's all foreign.
And most of us come from middle class families.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to put yourself into that position because you don't see that in your everyday life.
Whereas for us now, it might be like, oh, your family can't afford a car, or tech. Tech is a big thing, probably. So I tried to put it in terms that people would understand nowadays, like, oh, you can't afford a phone, or that kind of thing. It is hard for us to immerse ourselves in the world of the 1800s and to know what would show that you had money or didn't, or that is a tough thing to figure out as we're reading the original.
I also understood why John had to lie about his background, because when you were in high school, you don't want to stand out too much from the crowd, I think.
Right.
Like,
no one wants to really be different.
Yeah, you want to blend in and not have people pay too much attention to you. In your version, John and Meg, they meet in the drama class.
Oh yeah, that's another thing that they don't adapt very much. That Meg really wanted to be an actress, and she loved acting. And they'll show like Joe's plays and the Christmas scene where all the kids fall through the couch because there's too many people sitting there, and Amy's messing up her lines and not fainting right. But they don't really center around the fact that Meg was really into acting. So I tried to kind of put that in.
They show bits of their plays in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the 1994 film, they do mention that in 19th century, being an actor, it was seen a bit suspicious as a career. When I read some of these books that Louisa May Alcott liked to read, like Wilhelm Meister and like other German type of literature, he criticizes life of actor. Google locked me out and I had to log in.
Oh no, geez, come on, Google. Don't you know that people want to talk about Little Women for more than 40 minutes at a time?
Yeah. They should know my habits already.
Yeah, they should.
Louisa May Alcott, she sometimes kind of criticizes actors' life, like in Joe's Boys. I think Maggie's still like acting, but she still prefers to be mom and doing those homely things. But I was thinking maybe it's because of that sort of bad reputation that the actors had back then. Maybe that's why she didn't become a full-time actor.
Maybe.
I
mean, it's still not something that like a parent would be thrilled to hear. I want to be an actor.
My mom wasn't very happy when I said I want to go to art school.
One of our kids wants to go to art school.
My sister, she's an actress in an improvisation theater.
Oh, okay.
But she never wanted to make that her full-time job.
Right. As like a fun thing that you do.
Yeah. It's like a creative outlet for her.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. Because with writing, when it was just a hobby, I always had ideas and couldn't wait to sit down and write. And now that I'm trying to, make a writing career, and you look at the numbers and the money, and sometimes it can be a little daunting to sit down and actually come up with something because it's just so much more pressure. I think that's why it's taken me this long to finally, after finishing the March Sisters series, get back into really the groove of writing. I had several months where I was organizing my house and purging things from the closet and scraping paint off of our outbuildings so we could paint them. And a lot of that was, avoiding having to sit down and come up with another world. So I get that. It's hard when your artistic endeavors merge with career.
Meg is not the only one who have these questions, because then we have Jo, who really struggles with her writing career. In the second part of the books, she wrote those trashy novels. And then when Fredrik came, she started to take herself more seriously as a writer.
It's hard to find a balance between right to market and writing, what you really love to write and what you feel drawn to writing. But if you're going to make a career out of it, it has to sell. So yeah, it's not something just from Jo's time. It definitely influenced me wanting to change genres and do the young adult romance because it's popular. The key is finding something that's popular that you really want to write, like Little Women adaptations. It was so much fun that I didn't mind doing a popular genre.
When you enjoy it, that's the best part. In 19th century, if you were an actor, and then if you would like to combine that with a family, that might not have been so easy.
I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure those kinds of careers are hard now too, and we have, more quicker and more reliable forms of transportation, and we have the internet and we have Zoom, and I'm sure it seems like it's really hard now, but I can't imagine back then when they didn't have any of these forms of communication and travel, it would have been almost impossible for someone like Meg to have a family and a acting career.
Sometimes I come across these people who complain that Meg doesn't become an actress. When I read the book, I don't think she's that much into acting. I think she cared more about having a family.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, how many times do we say as a kid, oh, I'm going to be an actor, or I'm going to be an astronaut, or I'm going to be a whatever. And most of us, when we're older, don't end up being an actor or an astronaut or some lofty goal that very few people in this world actually end up doing. So
I wanted to be an archaeologist.
Oh, that sounds really fun. I have a friend who actually is an archaeologist, but she's the only one I know who is.
Yeah. And I was really very close to applying to university to go to study archaeology, but I ended up going to art school.
Okay.
But, maybe someday I could go back.
Either one sounds good. Yeah, you definitely could.
Yeah, if I would want to, but not so much now.
Yeah.
I still like history, and doing this podcast, that's one of those things. Like when you're a history nerd, this is a really good podcasting to do. Louisa May Alcott's life.
And what you do is kind of like archaeology because you're looking into all these sources and, with the Louisa May Alcott's letters and all the things written about her. And okay, now what were the times like?
When you read the original, you said he was funny, but then also annoying. I think there is some kind of this sort of thin line when funny becomes a bit annoying.
Yeah.
Especially when you're a teenager.
Yeah, I think so. There is a fine line between being funny and crazy and goofy and taking things too far. And I think especially with teenagers, it's easy to cross that line, especially when you're with your friends or there's people you want to impress. We all have that one friend that we can really get into trouble with. And I think that was Joe and Laurie were each other's one friend.
And it's funny in the original when he is composing the opera in Vienna after Joe has rejected him. Mm-hmm. There's this moment when he calls Joe a torment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, when you call her a torment, why are you pinning on her?
Right.
For that, I think it was the art fair chapter. There's this moment when Laurie is really frustrated when Joe is preaching him about about college.
Yeah, because he kind of he was like going to gambling rooms or whatever and being wild.
Sometimes it's just mind-blowing to me that people want Joe and Laurie together because
I know
Laurie has a crush on Joe, but then he also thinks Joe is a torment, and he is so annoyed with Joe. Laurie doesn't like Joe always that much. I think there was some kind of a need to have Joe in his life because he needed someone to tell him what to do with his life.
Yeah.
But when I was reading your book, I thought it was interesting because there were some moments when John makes these observations that Laurie goes to do these things that Joe wants to do, that he doesn't want to do himself.
Because he just wants to, be with her and do stuff she wants to do.
He watched films that won Academy Awards.
Yeah, the movies that she wanted to watch that he thought were stupid.
Stuff like that. And it was very close to the book. I kind of feel sad for Laurie because I felt like he was wasting his time on Joe. Then I feel bad for Joe because he was really like pinning on her when she didn't want his attention.
Yeah, it's not romantic. There's not much romantic about their relationship. That's why I loved that cartoon, because they were very clearly friends and had like a brother and sister kind of relationship, and they fought in that cartoon. And I remember a scene where Ian gets mad at her and comes into his house and is like kind of huffing and puffing and like throws his hat at the door, and it clearly shows that they drive each other crazy but are still very dear friends, which is pretty common with a close friend, brother, sister kind of relationship. But yeah, so when I was watching the movies as a teenager or a kid, I didn't understand that either. Like, why? Because from what I had read and seen in the cartoon, I'm like, why is this like a love thing when they never really were?
One of my friends said that it's not really a love thing. It's actually Laurie that he just wants to have sex with her.
Oh.
Maybe there is some of that.
But I think it was more, maybe, I don't know, but I think it was more like he just felt like he belonged in the family and loved the whole family. And nowadays you can be an add-on to a family in any way, shape, or form, but in those times I think you added on by getting married, and so that was kind of the logical progression.
Because when Laurie proposes Joe, it feels like he feels a lot more immature than Joe in that scene. Because he says these things like, I gave up billiards and all to be with you.
Yeah, he gets a little silly there.
It's a really funny line when he says that. It's such a bad reason for Joe to marry him, that he just wants to like play house with her.
Yeah, and it shows how he's grown up and been handed everything. So he's like, well, but I did this.
Mm.
That was probably a lot of work for him. Wow, I gave this up. I gave something up. This is big stuff. And she's not reacting the way he thought she would. Everything else is, I want this. Okay, here you go. And I
Yeah.
think he didn't know what to do or how to act when he doesn't get the thing he says he wants.